She said it on a perfectly ordinary afternoon, in the same coffee shop where we'd sat 100 times before. Sunlight filtered through the window, catching in her hair. Her voice was steady, practiced, almost rehearsed. I need some time to figure myself out. No calls, no texts, no contact, please. She looked calm to calm. I searched her face for hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty, anything that said she didn't really mean it. But all I saw was relief. And in that moment, I understood this wasn't a pause, it was an exit. A clean one. Wrapped in polite words, I nodded. No begging, no tears, no questions. Just a quiet okay. If that's what you need. For a second, she seemed thrown off by how icily I agreed, as if she'd prepared for a fight I refused to give her. We split the bill, walked outside, and went our separate ways. The city moved around us. Traffic, chatter, people rushing by, and nobody knew that a 3-year relationship had just ended in silence over lukewarm coffee. The first week, I did everything right. I respected her boundaries, just like she asked. I didn't text, didn't scroll her socials, didn't ask mutual friends how she was doing. I told myself I was being mature, that this was what love looked like sometimes. Patience, trust, space. I even felt proud of myself for not falling apart. But 2 weeks later, while I was making coffee, my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. Linda Thompson tagged Sarah Thompson in a post. Linda, her mum. I wasn't planning to click it, but my hand moved before I could stop it. The photo loaded slowly. A bright pool, clear blue water, and then her, Sarah, laughing, drink in hand, sunglasses pushed up in her hair, tan skin glowing in the sun. The caption read, "So proud of my girl for finally taking that dream vacation." I read it again. And again. Every word hit harder the second time. She wasn't finding herself. She was on a beach in Mexico, drinking margaritas, looking happier than she had in months. My coffee went cold. I just stood there, staring at the screen. I didn't feel anger, not yet. Just a strange, sharp clarity cutting through the confusion. I checked the tag list. For names, I didn't recognize 3 of them, but the 4th one I did. Ethan, her co-worker. The guy who texted her late at night about work. The one she told me not to worry about. In the photo, he was standing next to her, close enough that his hand brushed the small of her back. It was subtle. Too subtle for anyone else to notice. But not for me. I knew what that kind of closeness looked like, the kind that doesn't need words to explain. I zoomed in, stared for a few seconds, then closed the screen. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't rage or accuse. I just sat there in silence. Coffee still steaming beside me. There's a kind of pain that doesn't explode. It just settles, like dust after a building collapses. You don't cry, you don't shout. You just understand. And in that quiet understanding, you know the truth. She never needed space to find herself. She needed distance to be with someone else, so I saved the picture. Then I turned off my phone. No confrontation, no explanation. Because sometimes silence is the only answer that says everything. The days after that felt strange. Not painful, not yet. Just hollow. I kept moving because that's what people do when they don't know what else to do. I went to work, answered emails, made small talk with coworkers, nodded when someone joked. I even laughed once or twice. though I couldn't tell if it was real or just muscle memory. At home, my apartment felt unfamiliar, like someone else's life I was borrowing. There were still traces of her everywhere. The throw blanket she picked out, the half-used vanilla candle on the counter, her mug sitting upside down in the drying rack. I thought about putting everything away, cleaning it all out. But I didn't. Not yet. Maybe part of me wanted to pretend she'd just come back and pick up where we left off. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to admit she wouldn't. Every night, I sat on the couch with the TV playing something I didn't watch. The light flickered across the room while I scrolled through meaningless feeds. Anything to keep my brain busy enough not to think. But it didn't help. Because no matter how many distractions I threw at myself, there was always that one image burned into the back of my mind, her laughing in the sunlight, his hand resting casually behind her. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It seeps in quietly, turning every memory into a question mark. I started replaying our conversations, scanning for the moments I missed, the cracks I should have seen. The late nights she said she needed to finish work, the weekend trip with friends, the new perfume she said she bought on sale. They all seemed so small before normal, harmless. Now, each one felt like a tiny piece of a puzzle I had been too blind to put together. Still, I didn't tell anyone. My friends noticed I was quieter, maybe a little colder, but they didn't push. I've always been the calm one, the rational guy, the one who handles things well, and maybe I leaned into that role too much, because it gave me something to hide behind. When people expect you to be fine, you learn to perform fine pretty convincingly. A few nights later, I got a text from a mutual friend, Emily. She didn't know what had happened. Not really, but she'd seen Sarah's posts. She sent a simple message. "Hey, are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Yeah," I typed. Then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I sent, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just busy, busy." That was the word I used when I didn't want to talk. Busy was a shield, a convenient lie. But the truth was, I wasn't busy, I was stuck. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily she had moved on, how public she was about it. She didn't hide the trip, didn't hide him. She didn't even change her privacy settings. It was like she wanted me to see. Or maybe she didn't think about me at all. I'm not sure which hurt more. One night, I opened my laptop and stared at a blank email. Her name was already in the to-line. I didn't even remember typing it. I sat there for an hour, trying to find words not to ask her to come back, but to ask why. Why she had to lie. Why she couldn't just end it honestly. But in the end, I didn't send anything. Because the truth is, I already knew the answer. She left because she wanted to. She lied because it was easier. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. The quiet was heavy, but in a strange way, it also felt like the only thing that was real. When you've been lied to, silence is the first sound that doesn't feel fake. That night, I dreamed about her, not the woman she became, but the version of her I used to know. The girl who laughed at dumb movies, who stole my hoodies, who kissed me good morning before work. In the dream, she was sitting across from me, smiling the way she used to. I asked her what happened, but she didn't answer. She just kept smiling until the silence became unbearable. I woke up before dawn. The city outside was still half asleep, washed in blue light. I sat there for a while, just breathing, And for the first time in weeks, I didn't check my phone. I didn't look for her, didn't wonder what she was doing. Instead, I made coffee, opened the window, and let the air in. It was cold, sharp, real. That's when it hit me. Sometimes the hardest part of losing someone isn't the absence. It's realizing how long you kept them around even after they were already gone. I started to realize that her silence wasn't just the absence of calls or messages. It was a quiet presence, something that still lived in the corners of my life even after she was gone. She was there in the smallest, most ordinary things. The faint trace of her perfume on my jacket, the half-empty bottle of shampoo she'd left behind, the coffee mug with the little chip on the rim that she always claimed as hers. Even the way the light hit the living room at sunset, that soft amber glow, reminded me of how she used to sit by the window, reading, her hair turning gold in the light. It was like the apartment had memorized her, and I was living inside those memories, trying to pretend they were just furniture. I thought time would dull it all, that every day without her would make the edges softer. But time didn't erase anything. It just rearranged the pain into something quieter, something that waited. The ache became background noise, steady and constant, like the hum of a refrigerator you stop noticing until the power goes out. That's what missing her felt like. A silence I'd grown used to, but couldn't escape. Some mornings, I'd still pour 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for her. It wasn't intentional. It just happened, muscle memory, I guess. I'd sit there, staring at the second cup, the steam rising and fading, like a ritual for someone who no longer existed in my world. There was something both pathetic and peaceful about it. I'd tell myself, this is the last time, but it never was, because part of me still wanted to believe she might walk through that door, apologize, sit down, and say she'd just been lost for a while, but she didn't. The world doesn't pause when you're grieving. Someone who's still alive. Bills still show up. Work still expects you on time. People still talk to you like nothing's wrong. So you play along. You smile when you're supposed to. You laugh at the right moments. You say I'm good even when you feel like a ghost inside your own body. I got good at that, at performing normalcy, at being fine. One evening, I decided to take a walk. It was a Friday, the city buzzing with that pre-weekend energy. I passed by bars, restaurants, street performers, places we'd once gone together. Every corner felt like a flashback. The Thai place where she spilled water on the table and we couldn't stop laughing. The bookstore where she spent 20 minutes choosing a single novel. Even the crosswalk where she used to grab my arm when the light turned yellow. All those moments were still out there, playing on loop, even if she wasn't. At some point, I stopped by a small park bench and just sat. There were couples everywhere, holding hands, sharing fries, taking selfies, and I thought, absurdly, someone else is doing those things with her now. The thought didn't make me angry. It just made me tired, like the kind of exhaustion that comes after carrying something heavy for too long. When I got home, I opened the drawer where I kept the little box, our box. Inside were tiny fragments of a life, ticket stubs, photos, a note she left once that said, "Don't forget breakfast." I unfolded it, smoothed out the creases. Her handwriting still looked warm, familiar. I wanted to hate it, but I couldn't, because every piece of her that hurt me was also something that once made me happy. That's the cruel part. Love doesn't disappear just because someone stops deserving it. Later that night, I found myself thinking about Ethan again. Not with rage, just curiosity. What kind of person was he to her? Did he make her laugh the way I used to? Did she talk about me to him, or did she pretend I never existed? I opened his social media again. There it was, a photo from a small dinner party. Candles, soft lighting, laughter frozen mid-frame. She was in the corner of the picture, next to him, smiling. That same easy, effortless smile that used to belong to me. But this time, I didn't feel the sharp sting I expected. I just felt empty, like watching a movie I'd already seen too many times. I stared for a long moment, then quietly closed the tab. That was the last time I'd look at her picture. I sat by the window afterward, the city lights flickering through the glass. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and I thought about how life keeps moving, uncaring. There was something strangely peaceful about that. The idea that my pain was just one small sound in a city full of noise. I started writing that night. Not letters to her. I had nothing left to say, but thoughts to myself. Fragments of what I felt, but couldn't say out loud. The anger I'd swallowed, the words I never used, the memories that still burned. Each line I wrote felt like opening a window in a suffocating room. The air hurt, but it was real. They say healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering differently. Maybe that's true, because for the first time since she left, I didn't write about her as the person who hurt me. I wrote about her as someone who once made me happy, and that simple shift felt like progress. I don't know when I'll stop loving her. Maybe it'll take months, maybe years. Maybe it'll never completely go away. But that night, sitting by the window with the city breathing outside, I realized something important. Healing doesn't always start with forgiveness. Sometimes it starts with acceptance. And that's exactly what I did. I accepted that she's gone, and that I'm still here. Time passed quietly, as if nothing had ever happened. But something inside me was changing, slowly, almost invisibly. I still went to work, still came home, still made my morning coffee, but the bitterness tasted different now. It wasn't the coffee, it was me. I no longer thought about pouring a second cup. The chair across from me was just an empty seat now, not a reminder. I'd stopped imagining her walking through the door, smiling, saying, "I'm home." I'd stopped waiting for that. And strangely, that was the moment I realized. I was starting to forget. Not the kind of forgetting that happens all at once. Not like pressing delete. It was gradual, gentle. I started losing her in small details. Her voice became harder to recall. I had to concentrate to remember her laugh. Even her perfume, once so distinct, was fading, replaced by nothing more than a faint echo. Like a dream you wake from, knowing it was vivid but unable to hold onto the images. I wasn't sure if I should feel sad about that or grateful. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old photo of us at a summer fair. She was laughing, holding on to my shirt, her face bright under the sun. I was squinting, annoyed by the heat. I stared at that picture for a long time. There was no pain, only a quiet kind of tenderness for two people who once believed they'd go farther than they did. I placed the photo back in the box and closed the lid gently. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to keep it close. After that, I started going out more. Met up with a few old friends, had a few beers, talked about random things. No one mentioned her, and I didn't bring her up. But somewhere between the laughter and the noise, I realized something important. I could still feel joy. It wasn't complete yet, not pure, but it was there. Faint, fragile, like the first light after a storm. One evening, Emily texted me, "Want to grab a drink? I'm free tonight." I thought for a moment, then said yes. It was the first time since the breakup that I felt ready to spend time with someone without feeling guilty. We sat at a small bar at the end of the street. The air was cool, the beer cold. Emily talked a lot, and I mostly listened. Sometimes she laughed, and I found myself laughing too, genuinely. There were no expectations, no comparisons, just two people talking. And in that moment, I felt normal again. When I got home, I looked around my apartment. Same walls, same sofa, same kitchen with her old cups still sitting on the shelf. But this time, nothing carried weight. They were just things, not memories. I turned off the lights, opened the window. The night air came in soft and cold. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt calm. Not because I'd forgotten her, but because I'd stopped fighting the memories. People say forgetting doesn't mean erasing. It means being able to remember without pain. Maybe that's where I was heading. She would always be a part of my story, just not the final chapter. Just a middle one, where I learned how to lose, how to stand again, and how to keep walking alone. That night, I didn't dream of her. No more blurry smiles or silent goodbyes. Just deep, quiet sleep, empty, but peaceful. And when morning came, I woke up not waiting for anyone. I made my coffee, watched the sunlight spill across the floor, and for the first time, I smiled. Not for her, but for myself. Everything changed quietly. There was no sudden breakthrough, no day I finally got over her. It just happened little by little. Each morning, I woke up feeling a little lighter, thinking a little less, missing a little softer. The emptiness didn't vanish overnight. It simply filled itself with small, ordinary things, new habits, quiet routines, moments that didn't mean much on their own, but somehow, they stitched my life back together. I started running in the mornings. At first, it was just to tire myself out, to make my body ache more than my heart did. But gradually, the rhythm of my steps, the sound of my breathing, the chill of the dawn air, all of it made me feel alive again. No longer the one left behind, but someone moving forward. I listened to music while running, the same songs I once avoided because they reminded me of her. Now, they didn't. The lyrics were just words again, the melodies just sound. I began to rearrange my apartment not to erase her, but to reclaim the space. I painted the walls, changed the curtains, threw away the small things I'd once kept just because she'd touched them. The apartment felt brighter, more open, and somehow, so did I. There were nights I sat alone, no TV, no music, just the ticking of the clock and the soft light from the lamp. I realized silence no longer scared me. It wasn't punishment anymore. It was company. One day, a mutual friend invited me to a birthday party. I almost said no, but a few hours later, there I was, standing in a crowded bar, drink in hand, smiling more naturally than I expected. I looked around and noticed something strange. I wasn't afraid of the faces I didn't know, and I wasn't haunted by the thought of her anymore. For the first time, I felt separate from the version of myself that used to exist with her. Emily came over halfway through the night and asked, "You doing okay?" I smiled, and for once, it wasn't a polite lie. "Yeah, I actually am." She smiled back, didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Some things don't require explanation, they're simply understood. When I got home, I put on some soft jazz. The melody drifted through the room like a slow heartbeat. I sat by the window, watching the city lights reflect off the glass, and I thought, I've made it through. No anger, no regret, just quiet acceptance. Acceptance that it happened, that it ended, and that it belonged to a version of me I no longer was. I realized then that the hardest part of healing isn't forgetting someone else, it's remembering yourself. I'd spent so long living as we that I'd forgotten what it meant to just be me. And now, I was learning that again. How to live without an audience. How to feel joy without sharing it. How to walk forward without looking back. The next day, I got a message from a coworker, an invitation to an outdoor concert. I hesitated for a moment, then typed back, "Yeah, I'd love to." Not because I was searching for something new, but because I finally felt ready. Ready to open up to life again. Not to replace anyone, but to live fully that night. Before falling asleep, I didn't think about her. Not because I forced myself not to, but because I simply didn't need to anymore. And as sleep pulled me in, I smiled. Not because I had forgotten, but because after everything, I had finally found my way back to myself. Life had quietly found its rhythm again. So steady, in fact, that sometimes I forgot I had ever gone through a storm. Enough time had passed for pain to turn into memory, and memory into a story, one I could tell without my voice breaking. I'd learned how to live alone, how to enjoy quiet mornings, how to appreciate the freedom I once feared. I no longer searched for her in crowds or thought of her whenever an old song played. I truly believed everything was over. And then, one afternoon, I saw her again. It was an ordinary day, clear sky, light breeze. I was at the grocery store, picking out a few things for dinner. Standing in line to pay, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I froze before I even turned around. My chest tightened, and somehow I already knew. When I looked, there she was, only a few feet away. Same eyes, same hair, but something about her was different. Maybe the way she smiled, or the way her gaze flickered past me before she looked away. She wasn't alone. A man stood beside her. Not Ethan, but someone else. A calm-looking guy, gentle, steady. They seemed content. No rush, no tension, no attempt to hide. She wasn't the woman from those photos that used to break me. She looked older, calmer, maybe a little tired, but peaceful. I didn't know if she saw me or not, but I just stood there quietly, watching. There was no anger, no sharp sting of memory. Only a strange, soft feeling, like seeing a character from an old story you once loved. I paid for my groceries and walked out before she did. But as I reached the parking lot, I heard someone call my name. Jake. I turned. It was her. She stood there holding a paper bag, her voice small but steady. "It's been a while," she said. I nodded. "Yeah, it has." There was a short silence between us. Not awkward, just ... still. Then she said, "I heard you're doing well." "I'm really glad for you." I smiled, and it was genuine. "Thanks. You look well, too." She smiled back, and it didn't hurt this time. It just reminded me of a version of her I once cared deeply for, the one I'd truly wanted to protect. About back then, ... She hesitated. "I'm sorry. I didn't handle things right." I shook my head. "It's okay. We're different people now." And I meant it. Because at that moment, I realized forgiveness isn't something you give because they deserve it. It's something you do because you deserve peace. We stood there for a few more seconds. Then she said softly, "Be happy, okay." "I will," I replied. "You too." No hugs, no long stares. Just two people who once loved each other, now meeting again, smiling and walking away. That evening, I went home, turned on the light, set down the groceries, and sat quietly for a while. I thought about the encounter, but not with sadness, with calm. I realized that some people don't come back to reopen wounds. They come back so you can see that you've healed. Seeing her again didn't break my heart. It reminded me how far I'd come. I opened the window, letting the night breeze flow in. The city lights shimmered outside, busy, alive, endless. And for the first time, I felt part of it again. There was no her, no us, only me, steady, peaceful, free. I don't know if she ever thinks about me anymore. But it doesn't matter, because now I understand some love stories don't need a perfect ending. Sometimes one last meeting, one quiet smile, is enough to let go completely. A year after that last encounter, my life had quietly changed, not dramatically, not with fireworks or revelations, but in slow, steady ways. Like a tree growing through winter, I had found my way back to light. The sadness from that time no longer felt like a wound. It had softened into something calm, a quiet part of me I could look back on, not with pain, but with gratitude. I had a new job, new friends, and sometimes I still visited the old apartment where everything began. Every time I stepped inside, the place felt different, brighter, cleaner, like both the room and I had been cleared of the weight of the past. I'd make coffee, open the window, and sit there watching the street below. The view was the same, but I wasn't. I was no longer the man who lived for a we that no longer existed. I was simply myself, grounded, peaceful, whole. Then one afternoon, in a small bookstore, I met someone. There was no spark of destiny, no cinematic moment, just a quiet exchange. She asked about the book I was holding, and we started talking. Her voice was warm, her eyes open and kind. The conversation flowed easily from novels to music to life. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that didn't carry history or complication. It felt light, and for the first time I thought, maybe this is what beginning feels like. A few days later, we met for coffee. I arrived early, and as I sat waiting, I realized my heart was racing, not with fear, but anticipation. This time, there was no dread, no worry about losing someone again. I just wanted to be there, fully present. When she arrived and smiled at me, I smiled back, naturally, effortlessly, like breathing. That afternoon wasn't extraordinary. It wasn't long, it wasn't magical, but it felt right. Not because she reminded me of anyone, but because she didn't. I wasn't searching for ghosts anymore. I wasn't measuring her against a memory. I was simply talking, listening, laughing, showing up as myself, in the simplest and most human way possible. That night, when I got home, I sat alone in the quiet and realized something. I had finally made it through my longest winter. There was no rescue, no miracle, just time and a slow, honest willingness to face myself. I wasn't angry or regretful or afraid of love anymore, because I finally understood love isn't a promise of forever. It's the courage to open your heart again, even after it's been broken. I looked out the window at the city lights flickering like small, steady breaths. A part of me still remembered, but another part was ready to begin again. I closed my eyes and smiled softly. For the first time in years, that smile carried no sadness, no weight. Just peace, gentle, quiet, real. And in that moment, I understood when you're brave enough to love again, not someone else, but life itself, that's when you finally know you've healed.